Hello and welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. Coming up on our program, Congressman Mike Honda and challenger Ro Khanna battle to represent Silicon Valley on Capitol Hill. We sit down with each candidate. And the Golden Gate Bridge, a Bay Area icon and sometimes the scene of tragedy. We look at new efforts to prevent suicides. But first, only 18 days left until the presidential election. House Speaker Paul Ryan is preparing to visit California next week to help Republican candidates, as their party's nominee, Donald Trump, is trailing Hillary Clinton by a growing margin in most polls. This week, in the third and final debate of the presidential race, Trump and Clinton had testy exchanges on everything from immigration to professional experience to the integrity of the election process.
She should never have been allowed to run for the presidency based on what she did with emails and so many other things.
But, sir, there is a tradition in this country. In fact, one of the prides of this country is the peaceful transition of power, and that no matter how hard fought a campaign is, that at the end of the campaign, that the loser concedes to the winner. Are you saying you're not prepared now to commit to that principle?
What I'm saying is that I will tell you at the time. I'll keep you in suspense.
Well,
okay?
Chris, let me respond to that, because that's horrifying. You know, every time Donald thinks things are not going in his direction, he claims whatever it is rigged against him.
And joining me now is PBS NewsHour political correspondent Lisa Desjardins. Lisa, nice to have you with us again.
Great to be back, Thuy. Thanks for having me.
Well, Trump's declaration this week that he would leave the nation in suspense over whether he would accept the election's results, what impact is that having on the campaign trail for both Trump and Clinton?
I think we're waiting to see exactly what the polls tell us about that. We've seen clearly a shift in momentum since the first presidential debate, and that's been a shift away from Donald Trump. Not just that first debate performance, but also, of course, the tapes that came out with the hot mic incident of him on the bus with Billy Bush talking about women, and then accusations of sexual assault. We've seen some of his supporters, of course, vigorously defend him, but overall the polls have moved away from him. We have to see if this next, his words about whether he accepts or not the results of the election will affect voters. It's not clear yet.
And how are the controversies surrounding Trump, not only the comments made on the bus, but also, you know, his comment during the debate this week about the bad hombres when he was talking about immigration, a huge issue here in California, of course, his other comment about nasty woman. What kind of impact is that having down ballot, do you think? Or do voters make a distinction between the Trump brand and the Republican brand?
I think those are very good questions, and I think the sort of bad hombre and nasty woman comments, those certainly are being circulated a lot in the press. There's a lot of discussion about that. We have to see whether that's hurting him with the voters he needs the most. And I think two groups of voters that he needs the most are Hispanics and women. So he made comments that kind of connect with both of those groups in a way that he might not want. You know, that's just anecdotal. I don't think we've seen direct scientific or polling evidence that that's had an effect. But it's not the storyline that he wants necessarily with those two groups of voters. As for how this is affecting the Republican brand, we know a little bit more about that. Paul Ryan has been out stumping for Republican ideas, and he is not mentioning Donald Trump's name. He is not defending Donald Trump, and he is not openly talking about voting for Donald Trump. He is trying to keep the Republican brand sort of the Jack Kemp, Ronald Reagan idea, fiscal conservative, balanced budgets, more privatization, more power to businesses, those kinds of things he's talking about. But, you know, when he had this speech earlier this week, when he was speaking to some college Republicans in Wisconsin, it got very little coverage. So each Republican seems to be a bit on their own to try and navigate these very tricky waters, but they all know that they are having a major branding question right now.
Speaking of House Speaker Paul Ryan, he is traveling to California next week to help some vulnerable congressional candidates here, including Chef Denim, Steve Knight, and Scott Jones. There are some models now, forecast models, showing that Trump could become the first Republican presidential nominee to lose Orange County. That would be the first time that's happened here in California since 1936. So do you think Ryan's presence here would actually help Republican candidates all that much?
I suspect in individual races it really could, to be honest. We've seen up until this point some Republican candidates for Senate and for House have outperformed Donald Trump, that voters have shown a willingness to split the ticket, that they say, yes, I can decide one way for president and decide a different way for down ballot races. We're not lemmings, I guess voters would want to say. And I think that we will see a lot of split tickets this year. Now, as Donald Trump, if he continues this slide, if his momentum keeps going this direction, it just makes that harder and harder, not just because of, will voters vote for a single party, but the question is, will Republicans show up at all? That's where someone like Paul Ryan can help a down ballot candidate by telling Republicans in that area, you do need to go to the polls, even if you feel very uncomfortable or unhappy with the presidential race, you still need to show up for everyone else.
All right, 18 days left until Election Day. PBS NewsHour political correspondent Lisa Desjardins, thank you so much for being with us. And we turn now to the South Bay and a closely watched contest to represent Silicon Valley in Congress. 8-term Congressman Mike Honda is facing a second challenge from attorney Ro Khanna. Honda narrowly beat Khanna 2 years ago. Now, Khanna, also a Democrat, is highlighting a lengthy House ethics probe into Congressman Honda. But the congressman is alleging Khanna's campaign hacked into his campaign donor list. KQED senior editor for politics and government, Scott Shafer, talked with each of them earlier.
Joining me now is Congressman Mike Honda, who represents District 17 in Silicon Valley. Good to see you.
Good to be here. Thank you.
You're running for a 9th term in Congress.
Yes.
What would you say from where you sit? What is the biggest challenge today facing Silicon Valley?
I think in Silicon Valley, the two big areas is the inequity in salaries for service workers. And I think the other is housing. Housing is such a big issue in our district.
And are those issues that you, as a Congress member, can do something about?
Well, there are roles that we can play. For instance, working with HUD, I had Joaquin Castro come down for an extra day to visit our homeless projects to show that there are a variety of ways to address the homelessness of not only veterans, but also those others who are in the streets. But I wanted to give them also a document I put together. It's called the Inventory of Surplus and Underutilized Lands, to look at that as a possible way of building homes.
But you also represent, of course, some of the biggest names in the tech industry. Surely. Apple, Facebook, Google is around there as well. You represent the innovation economy, and yet I hear you saying that your biggest concerns are really sort of low-income folks. Is that going to make the tech industry feel a little bit left out?
I don't think so, because the tech industry is one of the leaders in looking at issues around housing and the inequitable salaries and everything else like that. And they've led the way to increase salaries of their own staff. And also Silicon Valley Leadership Group has put together a housing trust fund where they're pulling together funds, and I put some federal monies in there to help people, first-time buyers and down payments. So everybody's working together on that.
It's a district where some say that the future is invented. It's in the tomorrow business.
Sure.
When you think about all the emerging technology coming out of your district in Silicon Valley, generally, what excites you?
I think the possibility of being able to communicate with anybody globally and in a very fraction of a second. I guess the idea is the collapsing of time and distance allows us to be very efficient.
What about things like driverless cars and robotics that are replacing people?
Well, I think that's the future, and people never thought that we'd replace the horse, but we did that.
So that's just part
I think
of technology.
It's the next step in how we increase the confidence and the reliability of driverless cars. That's going to be the issue.
So you're running a very contentious race with your challenger, Ro Khanna, and both of you have been running television ads. And I want to take a look at one of your ads from your campaign. We'll come back and talk about it. Let's take a look.
Sure.
With a history of shutting down companies and destroying jobs,
I gotta take this.
no wonder Khanna's answered their call for tax breaks for millionaires, outsourcing jobs overseas.
Let me see what I can do.
While refusing to protect Social Security. Corporate interests get enough face time in Washington. We don't need Ro Khanna dialing it up.
Congressman, that ad portrays Ro Khanna as being unethical, beholden to Wall Street. Is that what you believe?
Well, it's a fact that he's received over $450,000 from Wall Street.
When you say Wall Street, do you mean?
Wall Street, people who are involved with the financial aspects of this country. People that, normal people like myself don't usually access in terms of, or don't seek help from them. And to say that he's one of the folks, but portrays himself one way, he is not really forthcoming in the kinds of income that he really does.
What about the portrayal in that ad? There's an Indian-looking actor playing Ro Khanna in the back seat of that limousine. Did you have any qualms about that as someone who has faced discrimination in your own past?
Sure. I think that the last time he accused me of being racist because he said that there was a red dot on on his picture. I didn't have anything to do with that, but this one, I'll take full responsibility for it. It's
any regrets about it, or?
No, I think that that's depicting someone like himself taking money from wherever he can.
Yeah.
And this is the idea is that he's taking money from Wall Street,
Yeah.
and he's saying that he's the people's people.
In one of his ads, your opponent, Ro Khanna, alleges that you, in all your time in Congress, passed one bill, and that was to name a post office. Is that a fair charge, and what's your reaction?
Well, I did have one bill that changed the name of post office to Gordon Chan, and I'm proud of that. But the thing about Congress is that it's not only about having your name on a bill.
Is that an accurate characterization, though, that you have your name on just one bill?
That part is accurate, but what we do as congressional members is a lot of other things too. And we work on different projects, different bills, and we get those things done. So with the results that I've had over the past 16 years, I've brought in almost $1 billion worth of revenue and all kinds of other kinds of programs that affect education, nonprofits, Silicon Valley.
You're facing your own investigation and questions about ethics. The House Ethics Committee is investigating. They voted unanimously to investigate, and there are questions about you giving favors to high donors for things like expediting visas and that sort of thing. What's your reaction? I mean, isn't that the kind of thing that you're sort of accusing him about, of favoring the rich?
Well, it's the ethics issue is one of House rules, whether we had violated House rules. In order to address that, I did two things. One, to let the people know that I made a decision that nobody on our official staff will be participating.
But there was
in
the conclusion of the report found that there was substantial reason to think that you'd done.
Right. The conclusion report passed it on to the House Congressional Ethics Committee, which is the real committee that really takes all the information, and they're moving through it right now. So we're cooperating with them 100%, and we're not saying that we're just waiting for the outcome.
All right.
The charge I have against my own opponent, he behaves differently.
All right, and we're going to get a chance to talk with Ro Khanna next, but thank you very much for coming in. You can check out KQED's voter guide with information on propositions and candidates online at elections.kqed.org. Joining me now is Ro Khanna, who's challenging incumbent Mike Honda for his seat in Congress. Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, you want to represent a district that is right in the middle of the innovation economy. Tell me what you think is the biggest challenge facing folks in the 17th Congressional District.
It's education and jobs. There's no question that jobs are being automated, that globalization is putting pressure on it. I teach economics at Stanford. I worked for the Obama administration, and I've offered a plan for how we're going to educate the next generation to have the jobs in the 21st century and how we're going to put people to work given the challenges of automation.
You kind of alluded to, automation, robotics, and it is going to be displacing people or eliminating jobs going forward. Is there anything that, as a member of Congress, you would do or be thinking about or pushing for in terms of policies?
Well, a couple of things. One is more investment in career technical education. Unfortunately, we've been cutting that. But in my district, in Independence High School, those folks who are learning automotive electronics, many of them have gotten jobs at Tesla. We need to be really focused on the trades. We also need to make college universal and affordable. And I've come out for Robert Reich's plan, which is to have people go to public college for free and then pay it back once they graduate and get their first job.
There is so much emerging technology coming out of your part of California, Silicon Valley. When you think about that, what excites you the most?
Well, the most exciting thing, in my judgment, is biotechnology. I mean, there is a chance of having personalized medicine eventually, where we will know someone's genetic profile and be able to customize medicine to their unique needs. Of course, there's driverless cars, which is a positive but also a challenge. The biggest employment job in this country is drivers. And so this is where I think we have to deal with both the positives of technology and also the dislocations.
You've talked about something called universal minimum income. Describe what that is, and I assume that's for people who may not be as fully employed as they are now because of things like driverless cars.
Exactly. The challenge is we're going to often have people who may not have full-time work and maybe stretching to make ends meet. Universal minimum income is a bipartisan idea proposed by James Tobin, a liberal economist, and Milton Friedman, which says there's a threshold income that everyone who works in this society should achieve. $30,000, $35,000, we can debate. I believe we need that, and it's an idea that both Republicans and Democrats.
How would that work? I mean, that sounds expensive.
Well, it would be a massive expansion of the Earned Income Tax Credit. Currently, we have the Earned Income Tax Credit, which takes you from $15,000, $20,000 to getting some refund. And I would say we have to expand it. And of course, we would have to have the wealthy pay a greater tax. People making over $1 million who are currently paying capital gains tax only should be paying more tax. But I think it's important to have a fair society in a world where jobs are going offshore and where jobs are being automated.
You are running again against Mike Honda. It was a close race last time. You did better in the primary this time than 2 years ago. And a lot of ads have been run on your campaign and on the other side. Let's take a look at one and we'll come back and talk.
Sure.
Around too long, his record an embarrassment. In 15 years, Mike Honda passed only one bill to name a post office. Honda has one of the worst attendance records in Congress. Now it's unanimous. Democrats and Republicans on House ethics joining together, investigating Honda's abuse of office.
But I'm wondering, you're portraying Congressman Honda, who's 70. You're 40 years old. Is there an element of ageism, which is often prevalent in Silicon Valley?
Not at all. I mean, I've come out in supporting Hillary Clinton. I've supported Jerry Brown. I don't think age is relevant. I think what is relevant is a person's record. And the reality is Congressman Honda has only passed one bill in 16 years compared to Anna Eshoo and Zoe Lofgren, who have a much more prolific record, who are about the same age. And Congressman Honda has this ethics investigation. So I think our ad is factual and fair.
There's been some issues about your campaign as well. Your former campaign director accused of illegally accessing campaign data that really belonged to Mike Honda. Yes. You said you didn't know about it, and he left the campaign the day those charges came out. Should you have known about it?
Well, I think the voters should go to the Mercury News and the newspapers. The Mercury News editorialized a week ago that this was a publicity stunt of a desperate incumbent, and the judge denied the congressman's motion. The lawsuit was filed 5 weeks before the final election. And I just hope that people will go and read the paper's assessment.
But based on what he did, your former campaign manager, how would you characterize it ethically?
First of all, we don't know because there have been allegations he hasn't had a chance to respond. He claims that he never accessed these documents.
So why did he leave the campaign then?
Well, he didn't want to be a distraction. He's a 25-year-old kid who the congressman is filing a federal lawsuit against, who's had to go hire an attorney and defend himself. He can hardly run a campaign. And I think it was outrageous what Mike did.
We asked Mike Honda about an ad of his where you're portrayed in the back of a limousine talking to Wall Street on your cell phone. There's a bottle of champagne. How do you feel about that characterization and the use of an actor who appears to be Indian American?
Well, Scott Harold in the Mercury News did a whole article saying that the ad was filled with racist innuendos. Imagine the outrage if we had had an ad with a Japanese-American actor. We would have never done that. I don't think that's Honda himself. I think his consultants made a terrible choice. And I hope he'll pull that ad because it's not who he is.
Yeah. You are what many would call an elite. You've taught at Stanford, you went to law school, you're well educated, you probably travel in circles with wealthy Silicon Valley folks, and that's not a criticism, that's, that's life.
But I took out student loans, still paying them off. I went to public school. And, it's very tough for this characterization, given that I'm the son of immigrants. There's never been an Indian American of Hindu origin, which is my faith, in Congress. I went to public school. I took out loans. I haven't had a easy path.
Yeah. So that characterization of someone who's out of touch with the have-nots, you would disagree with that?
I would strongly disagree. And I have spent so much time with young people in this district who can't pay for college, who don't have the right opportunities. And my passion is to give them a fair shot.
All right, Ro Khanna, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.
San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge is world-renowned for its beauty, and while it's a favorite for tourists, it's also a lure for those contemplating suicide. Nearly 500 people have taken their lives by jumping off the bridge since 2000. Now there are new efforts underway to reach distraught people, including adding 5 new officers to patrol the bridge. Joining us now to discuss these efforts are Bridge District General Manager Denis Mulligan and KQED reporter Stephanie Martin-Taylor. Welcome to you both.
Thank you, Thuy.
Denis, the Golden Gate Bridge, as you know, has long been known as one of the country's hot spots for suicides. But in recent years, there's been quite an alarming change in the age of those who show up intending to kill themselves.
That's true. Since 2000, we've had a 5-fold increase in people under the age of 25 coming to the bridge to hurt themselves. It's shocking and alarming. We've seen an uptick in the number of people coming to the bridge, but particularly young people. And so we've made a variety of changes. We've added staff, changed the procedures, taking steps to try to stop these young people and everybody from coming to the bridge to hurt themselves.
Well, let's talk about those steps in a moment. But first, do you have any idea as to why so many more young people are showing up to the bridge trying to commit suicide?
Well, the suicide rate in our country is growing. It's not going down just in general. This year, more Americans will die by suicide than in automobile accidents. We have lots of campaigns about reminding people to ticket or don't text and drive, but we don't have similar outreach to people, particularly young people, with respect to mental health issues. But for a variety of reasons, young people become despondent, and typically it's a one-day thing where they come to hurt themselves, and if we intervene, they'll go on and live a long, fruitful life. So it's vital that we stop them from hurting themselves.
And I know that among the measures you're taking are these new signs on the bridge urging despondent people to contact a crisis text line for immediate access to a counselor. And as we mentioned at the top, there will also be more patrol officers on the bridge coming soon. Stephanie, you talked to a family of a teenager who jumped to his death from the bridge. Can you tell us a little bit about their story and how do they feel about the new measures being taken?
Yeah, this is the Gamboa family. Their 18-year-old son, Kyle, 3 years ago, seemingly very impulsively drove to the Golden Gate Bridge and jumped. And since that time, the Gamboas have come to almost every, if not every, Bridge District meeting with photos of their son pushing for a suicide barrier. Now, talking to them, they are really happy about this new crisis text line and also the new officers. They believe even if these new steps save just one life, that's a good thing.
You also came to the Bridge Dispatch Center and paid them a visit there, and they have their what's called a Be on the Lookout book. What is that?
Yes, Captain Lisa Desjardins, who heads up the Bridge Patrol, showed me this binder, and it's really pretty stunning to look at. It's page after page of Facebook pages, basically. When parents get concerned that their children or other people with their loved ones might be coming to the bridge to commit suicide, they'll call in an email, and the dispatchers and patrol officers will actually go on Facebook and try to find out as much as they can about these people so that if they do encounter them on the bridge, they have some sort of information to make that connection. They can recognize their faces, but they could also know, does this person have a dog? Do they have a boyfriend or girlfriend? Anything that can start a conversation.
So that's smart. They're going to avenues where young people are expressing themselves and sharing photos of themselves.
That's right.
And you mentioned the Gamboa family pushing repeatedly for a suicide barrier, or in this case, a net, a steel safety net around the bridge, which has been widely discussed for many years now. Dennis, what is happening with that?
We opened bids to construct the net, and bids came in higher than we anticipated, so we're putting together a revised funding plan. We anticipate going to our board of directors at their December meeting to adopt a new revised funding plan and to award a construction contract to build the net.
So your board approved spending $76 million, and the lowest bid out of 2 bids, there were 2 bids that came in, the lowest bid was $142 million. And the deadline has passed, but you have requested a 3-month extension, right, from those companies to continue their bid?
That's correct. And both companies agreed to extend the bids to keep them valid for another 90 days. So the bids are valid through January 9th. Our board of directors meeting is on December 16th. And so we're putting together a funding plan that we can bring to our board at that juncture.
So where's the money going to come from?
We're working very aggressively with the outside funding agencies that helped us with the original funding plan. At this time, it's not finalized. but the preponderance of money will be government grants. There is an opportunity for staged philanthropic giving for those that may wish to leverage the preponderance of federal grants and participate in saving 30 lives a year, because that's what the net will do. The net will save 30 lives a year.
I just want to understand the funding situation more clearly, though. So that's a big gap, right? From $76 million, which is what you approved, to $142 million, which is the lowest bid. How are you going to make up that difference? And is increased funds, increased tolls a possibility?
The original funding plan took changes in federal and state law to take effect. A lot of our elected officials recognize how important and vital this project is because it will save so many lives. The Golden Gate Bridge is today a suicide magnet. So in about 4 years ago, federal law changed to make the project eligible for federal highway funds. Prior to that, it was not eligible. And then 2 years ago, we received some money through the state budget. So there's strong political support. We're working with our political allies, our advocates, working with the various funding agencies. And the plan is still coming together, but it's our expectation that at our December 16th Board of Directors meeting, we'll have a revised funding plan so we can move forward and build the net.
You're sounding very optimistic.
I am.
You are?
I am.
Okay, well, this
is a vital project. We both know, we had 186 people come to the bridge last year to hurt themselves. We stopped 153. They were taken off the bridge to a local hospital for psychiatric evaluation. But unfortunately, in 2015, 33 people died.
Of course, this discussion about a safety net has been going on for more than a decade now. There have been some critics, though, who say they're not convinced that a net is really an effective deterrent. Is there any evidence to show that it is a good deterrent?
Yes, nets have been built other places. There's a location in Australia. It's a cliff, for example. A barrier was built there, and suicides were cut more than in half there. Also, a bridge in Bristol, the UK. There was a suicide net put in place there, and not only did suicides go down, also a study was done about other locations around the Bristol area, and the suicide rate did not, there were no other, there wasn't a spike in suicides at other locations at that time.
Okay, well, very interesting, and we will monitor that December meeting and see how all this turns out, but certainly a troubling situation, and we hope that all of this that you're trying to do will help. Thank you so much, Golden Gate Bridge General Manager Denis Mulligan, and also our own reporter Stephanie Martin-Taylor.
Thank you.
And that does it for us. I'm Thuy Vu. Thanks so much for watching. Next week, we'll bring you an in-depth report about two dueling death penalty propositions. Prop 62 seeks to end it, while Prop 66 seeks to streamline executions. And we hope you'll join us for that. For all of KQED's news coverage, please go to kqednews.org.